Chapter 1. After the Last Bell. The last bell above the shop door gives its small, familiar note, and then the sound is gone. For a few moments, the old bookshop listens to itself. You remain in that gentle hush after the final customer has stepped out into the rain-softened street. Beyond the front window, the evening is blurred with weather and dim reflections. Droplets gather and slip down the glass, catching the glow from the lamps inside and carrying it downward in slow, wavering lines. The door has closed. The latch has settled. Footsteps have faded. What remains is quieter than silence alone. It is the kind of quiet made by many books, by wood that has held them for years, by a room that knows how to keep still. The air is warm with paper, not the dry, empty kind of paper, but the lived-in scent of pages turned often and put back with care. There is cloth, too, and old paste, and the faint mineral trace of rain cooled against the windows. Somewhere in the shop, a shelf gives a soft, thoughtful creak, as though easing its weight by the smallest degree. The floorboards answer underfoot with their own low murmur, never sharp, never sudden. Every sound seems wrapped in felt. You move past the public shelves now, slowly, as if the shop itself is guiding you inward. The aisles are narrow and companionable. Cloth-bound volumes stand shoulder to shoulder in muted greens, reds, and faded blues, their gilt titles dimmed by time and touch. Some lean together slightly, as though at rest. Some stand straighter, patient and reserved. The brass lamps fixed along the walls cast a low amber light that does not reach too far, and so each shelf appears out of a kind of dusk, then slips gently behind you again. At the back of the shop, nearly hidden between a tall case of atlases and a stack of archival boxes, there is a narrow door. Its paint has worn smooth around the latch. When it opens, it does so without hurry, with the soft, inward breath of a room long accustomed to evening work. Inside, the workshop waits. It is smaller than the shop and warmer. Here, the brass lamplight gathers close, pooling over a broad wooden table marked by years of careful use. The windows are rain-dim and darkening, their panes silvered at the edges where water moves across them. Along one wall stand shelves of tools and folded cloths, jars and brushes, rolls of linen tape, neat bundles of thread. Along another are the waiting books, modest stacks of worn volumes set one beside another, each one quiet, each one untroubled by delay. This room does not ask anything of you all at once. It only invites you nearer. You come to the table and rest in the circle of lamplight. The wood is smooth in some places, finely scarred in others, its surface carrying the memory of blades, rulers, pressing boards, and the steady passage of hands. A clean cloth lies folded near the edge. Beside it, a shallow dish for paste, a small brush with pale bristles, and a bone folder the color of old cream. None of it gleams. None of it is new. Everything has the softened look of objects used often and put back exactly where they belong. The rain continues at the windows. It does not drum or insist. It simply hushes the world beyond the glass, making the workshop feel more enclosed, more certain. Somewhere outside, water slips through a gutter in a thin, continuous run. Inside, the lamp gives off a low warmth. The shelves hold their lines. The books wait in their stacks, worn but dignified, as if they know this hour is theirs. You reach for the nearest volume. Its cover is cloth, once a deep blue, now faded towards smoke at the corners and along the spine. When you lift it, there is a pleasant heaviness to it, the settled weight of many pages gathered together. The boards are a little loose beneath the cloth. The edges of the paper have feathered softly with time. Inside, the end paper has begun to part from the hinge. Not dramatically, only enough to show where years of opening and closing have asked more than thread and glue could quite keep. There is no need to hurry such a book. You set it down gently and let your hand rest on the cover for a moment. The cloth is cool at first, then warmer under your palm. This is how the work begins here. Not with fixing, not with correcting, but with noticing. A loosened place, a softened edge, a seam that has grown tired. Small signs, understood without judgment. The book has been read, carried, opened under many lamps, perhaps left on many bedside tables. Its wear is not damage alone. It is a history written in touch. Around you, the workshop settles more deeply into evening. A board in the wall gives a small tick as the temperature shifts. The brush in its jar leans against the rim with the lightest tap. From the shop beyond the narrow door comes the muffled stillness of shelves standing guard in the half-dark. You can almost feel the larger room resting out there, while here in the workshop, the night remains awake, just enough for one more careful hour. You draw the folded cloth closer and smooth it open on the table. The gesture is simple, but it changes the space. The work surface is made ready. The book is lifted onto the cloth, centered in the lamplight. Your fingers straighten its angle by the smallest amount, aligning it with the grain of the wood beneath. Nothing more is asked tonight than this first act of welcome. A place prepared, a worn volume received, a room made orderly enough for gentle attention. The scent of paper and paste lingers close. Rain trails down the window in silver threads. Brass light warms the edges of the table and the curve of your hand. On the waiting shelves, other books rest in quiet stacks, their faded covers turned toward the room, patient as sleepers. And here, in this hidden workshop behind the public rows, the evening grows calm and close around you, as if the whole old shop has drawn its breath more softly and is ready, at last, to be mended a little by lamplight. Chapter 2. The tools in their places. You remain by the broad wooden table for a little while, letting the room settle around you more completely. The rain continues at the window with its soft, even hush. Somewhere beyond the workshop wall, a shelf gives a small, familiar creak, then is still again. Under the brass lamp, the surface of the table holds a warm circle of light, and within it, the evening seems to gather itself into simpler things. Wood grain, folded cloth, the pale curve of a tool, the waiting quiet before hands begin. Now your attention narrows. At one corner of the table, the bone folder rests where it was left. Smooth and faintly luminous, the color of old cream. You lift it first. It is cool for a moment in your hand, then quickly warmed. Its surface has been polished by long use, not glossy, but satin soft, with edges rounded by years of passing over paper and cloth. There's nothing sharp in it, nothing hurried. You set it down near the center of the table, straightened so that it lies easy to reach, its small weight making the wood feel steadier. Beside it, a pair of needles waits in a shallow tray. They are fine and quiet things, almost invisible until the lamplight catches them. You gather them gently, hearing the faintest tick as metal touches porcelain. Then place them beside a spool of linen thread. The thread is the pale color of flax, matte and calm, wound neatly, ready to be drawn out in measured lengths. You do not pull it yet. For now, it is enough to place it there, close to the needles, where one thing naturally belongs with another. A folded cloth comes next. It has been washed so many times that its fibers have softened into something between fabric and memory. When you shake it once, very lightly, it opens with a whisper and settles flat beneath your palms. You smooth it over the table, pressing from the center outward until every small crease has gone quiet. The gesture is simple, but the room seems to answer it. The work surface becomes clearer, more prepared, as though the evening itself has been gently straightened. Near the back edge of the table, small brushes stand in a jar, their handles worn silky where fingers have held them over many nights like this. You choose two, one a little wider, with pale bristles fanned soft at the tip, the other finer, for narrower lines and smaller corners. The bristles carry the faint, clean scent of paste and water and old paper dust. You lay them side by side on the cloth, not perfectly formal, only comfortably arranged, each with enough space around it to feel untroubled. Then the weights. They are modest things, not heavy enough to announce themselves, only solid enough to reassure. A smooth stone wrapped in faded linen, a pair of flat metal weights dulled by use, a small wooden block with corners softened from handling. One by one, you bring them nearer and set them in a row. Each makes its own subdued sound against the cloth-covered table. A soft thud, a gentler tap, the barely heard note of something finding its place. The sounds do not disturb the quiet. They deepen it. Outside, rain moves steadily down the panes. It blurs the darkening world beyond the glass until there is only the suggestion of the street lamp, a dim bloom behind water. Inside, the workshop keeps its own weather. Warm brass light, the dry sweetness of paper, the faint starch of cloth, the mellow trace of paste in its dish. The air is still enough that every object seems to rest exactly where it wishes to be. You reach for a small bundle of linen tape, coiled loosely like a ribbon saved from another season. Its weave is plain and sturdy beneath your fingertips. You set it near the thread, and beside that, a little pair of scissors with dark handles, their hinge moving with a soft, obedient click when tested once and then closed again. Nothing here is new. That is part of the comfort. The tools have already learned the shape of the work, and the work has learned the pace of the tools. A clean scrap of blotting paper is placed to one side. A second folded cloth joins the first. A shallow dish is drawn a little closer, its rim catching a warm line of lamplight. Even these smallest adjustments feel meaningful in the quiet. Not important in any grand way, only right. The table becomes orderly by degrees, and with each degree, the room grows gentler. There is no need to think ahead. No need to imagine the whole evening at once. It is enough to place one thing, then another, to let readiness arrive slowly, in its own good time. Your hand pauses on the edge of the table. Beneath your fingertips, the wood is marked by years of use. Faint scratches, a softened dent, a pale ring where a jar once stood. None of it asks to be hidden. The table wears its history plainly, the way the waiting books do. In this light, such traces feel less like wear than proof of care repeated. The room is full of that kind of proof. Brushes thinned by washing, cloths mended at the hem, a spool nearly spent, a jar clouded softly by many rinsings. Everything here has been kept and used and kept again. When you draw the chair a little nearer, its legs make a muted sound over the floorboards, then come to rest. You sit, and the lamplight gathers more closely around the table. The tools lie before you in their familiar order: bone folder, thread, needles, brushes, weights, cloths, tape, scissors, paper. Nothing crowded, nothing missing. For a few breaths, you simply look. The rain keeps on beyond the window. The shelves hold their silence. The brass lamp glows steadily above the cloth-laid table, where each small object now waits with patient purpose, calm in its place, as though the evening has been arranged not only for work, but for peace. Chapter 3. A spine loosened by time. The brass lamp glows steadily above the cloth-laid table, and for a little while, nothing more is needed than this quiet readiness. Rain hushes the window panes beyond the workshop door. Somewhere in the shop, a board gives a small, familiar settling sound, then is still again. The air holds its soft mixture of paper, linen, paste, and old cloth, warm under the lamp, and cool at the edges where evening gathers. Beside the arranged tools, a modest stack of waiting books rests with the patient composure of things that have learned not to hurry. Their covers are faded in different ways, one dulled to moss green, another to brown the color of tea, another to a blue so softened by years that it seems almost gray in this light. You let your attention drift over them without choosing at once. There is no urgency in the room. The books have waited this long. They can wait through one more breath and another. At last, your hand comes to rest on a volume somewhere in the middle of the stack. It is neither the largest nor the smallest, only one that seems ready to be lifted. The cloth of its cover is rubbed smooth at the corners. Along the spine, the title has faded to a faint suggestion of gold, more memory than lettering now. When you raise it from the pile, it gives the lightest sigh of movement, boards shifting against text block with a looseness that is easy to feel and easy to understand. You bring it into the center of the lamp's warm circle and set it down on the waiting cloth. For a moment, you simply look. The book is worn, but not distressed. Its age sits gently upon it. At the head and tail of the spine, the cloth has thinned where fingers once pinched it from shelves. The hinges have softened from years of opening and closing. That repeated gesture of trust between hand and page. One board no longer sits as firmly as it should. The spine covering has eased away just enough to show that time has been at work here, patient and quiet in its own way. You place your fingertips on the cover, and the cloth feels cool at first, then warmer beneath your hand. There is a particular softness that comes only from long use. When a surface has been touched so often that it no longer resists being known, the corners are rounded, not by damage exactly, but by companionship. This book has traveled through many evenings, many laps, many bedside tables, and lamplit pauses. Its looseness is not failure. It is evidence. The rain continues, fine and steady against the glass. You open the front cover only a little, not enough to strain anything, only enough to listen with your hands. The hinge yields more readily than it should, a softened place where support has thinned. The end paper inside is faintly foxed, cream gone warmer with years. And near the inner fold, there is a slight separation, delicate as a breath. You trace no farther than necessary. The gesture is light, almost hovering, as though touch itself can reassure. Page edges feather softly beneath your thumb. Some leaves sit a little proud of the rest, not torn free, only relaxed from their old alignment. The sewing inside still holds, though here and there the thread has loosened its neatness. You can see the signatures resting together in their gathered sections. still faithful to one another, simply in need of being drawn close again. The book gives off that deep, dry fragrance old pages keep for decades. A little dust, a little cloth, a little sweetness like wood left in a warm room. Under it lingers the workshop's clean scent of paste and washed cotton. The two mingle beneath the brass lamp until the whole table seems to breathe in a slow and settled way. You turn another few pages carefully, letting them fall open only where they wish to go. There is no need to search for every weakness. The important things reveal themselves without being pressed. A slight gap at the spine, a tenderness in the joints, a gathering that has shifted just enough to ask for steadier support. Nothing here feels alarming, only understandable, only human in its way, though no such thought needs to be spoken aloud. Your palm smooths lightly over the open page, not flattening, only resting there long enough to feel the faint rise of paper laid in layers. The leaf is cool and thin and quietly resilient. Beneath it, the next page waits. Beneath that, another and another. All those small held spaces, each one still in place. The room remains close around you. Shelves beyond the table stand in shadowed rows. A brush in its jar leans against porcelain with the tiniest dry click as the wood settles. Rain threads down the window in silver lines you do not need to see to know are there. The lamp keeps its amber pool of light exactly where it is needed. No more and no less. You close the book again and rest both hands on either side of it. The loosened spine lies between them, familiar now. Not a problem to be solved all at once, only a place to begin. You feel where the cloth has lifted, where the boards have drifted, where the structure beneath still waits, sound enough to answer gentle care. For another quiet moment, nothing moves. Then one hand slides to the spine and the other to the foredge, and you lift the book once more with that same unhurried steadiness. You angle it toward the light, examining the softened hinge, the old thread tucked within, the patient shape of a binding that has carried its years with grace. In this small act of noticing, the evening seems to settle more deeply around you. The table, the lamp, the rain, the waiting tools, the worn cloth under your hands. Everything draws inward to this single, calm task. And here, with the book open just enough to reveal how it has come loose, you pause again, as if the gentlest repairs begin not with doing, but with seeing clearly what has been asked to hold for a very long time. Chapter 4. Thread through the signatures. So you begin there, in the quiet understanding of how the book has loosened over time, with your hands resting lightly on either side of the open pages. The lamp keeps its small brass sun above the table. Rain moves in a soft, even hush against the window beyond the workshop wall. Somewhere in the shop, a board gives a familiar, sleepy creak, then settles again. The gatherings of pages lie before you in their patient order. Each folded section, a little world of paper held together once, and ready now to be held again. You ease them into a neater line, not forcing anything, only inviting each section to rest beside the next. The paper has a dry, velvety sound as it shifts. A whisper, then stillness. Another whisper, then stillness again. Nearby, the linen thread waits in its pale coil, flax-colored in the lamplight, matte and soft, with a quiet strength that does not need to announce itself. You draw out a measured length. The thread slips over your fingers with the faintest drag. Cool at first, then warmer where it passes through your hand. The needle follows, small and plain, lifting from the tray with a tiny, bright glint before the lamplight softens it. Nothing in the room hurries you. The brush rests where it was placed. The bone folder lies smooth and cream pale on the cloth. The wrapped stone and flat weights wait without impatience. Even the rain seems content to keep a steady rhythm at the glass, as though it, too, understands that evening work is best done slowly. You bring the first signature closer. The fold opens just enough. The needle enters with a careful, almost secret motion, and the thread follows after, drawing through the paper in a line so fine it is felt more than seen. There is a small resistance, then a gentle yielding, a soft pull, the whisper of linen moving against the inner fold. Then the needle emerges again, in, through, out. The motions are small enough to fit inside a breath. Each pass makes its own modest sound. The dry touch of paper, the faint slide of thread, the nearly inaudible tap when the needle is set down for a moment against the table's worn wood. You gather the next section to meet the first. Their edges align beneath your fingers. The old pages, cream and slightly foxed, settle into one another with the relieved neatness of things returned to company. Again, the thread goes through. Again, it draws close. Again, the sections are held a little more securely than before. The work does not ask for thought so much as attention. Not the bright kind, not the kind that sharpens itself against a task, but the softer kind that can rest inside repetition. The eye follows the fold. The hand finds the opening. The needle passes. The thread slides. The fingers draw it snug, but not too snug. Enough to support. Enough to gather. Enough to let the paper remain itself. Outside, rain traces the window in longer threads of its own. Now and then, a drop gathers enough weight to travel downward, and the glass answers with a dim, liquid murmur. In the workshop, the lamp glow stays warm and close, holding the table, the cloth, the open book, and your hands inside its amber circle. Another stitch, another gentle draw of linen, another joining. The signatures begin to behave less like separate things, not erased into one another, only accompanied. Their slight shifts lessen. Their edges sit more evenly. The looseness that first showed itself so clearly is still remembered in the shape of the folds, in the softness of the old paper. But now it is met by something steady. You pause only to let the thread rest across your fingers, to feel its texture once more. It is pleasantly rough, like a fine, dry grass softened by long keeping. The needle turns in the light, then disappears again into the inner crease. A tiny movement, a patient return. The sort of action that grows more soothing each time it repeats. There is comfort in the pattern of it. Needle through, thread after, a little pull, a brief stillness, then once more. The room seems to listen with you. Shelves stand quiet along the wall, their rows of waiting books dim beyond the brightest pool of light. The paste dish holds a pale sheen. Folded cloths keep their softened corners. The air smells faintly of paper dust, linen, and the ghost of paste from earlier preparations. Beneath it all is the old wood scent of the workshop itself, dry and warm, with rain-cooled evening pressing gently at the panes. As the sewing continues, the book changes in almost invisible ways. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, only a growing coherence. The sections answer one another more readily. The spine, once eased apart, begins to remember its line. Your palms guide the pages into place between stitches, smoothing lightly, never flattening with force, only reassuring the paper where it wishes to lie. And because the work is repetitive, the mind need not climb anywhere. It can remain here, close to the table, close to the sound of thread slipping home, close to the little pauses between one stitch and the next, where everything is quiet enough to hear the rain, the lamp's faint warmth, the soft settling of the shop around you. At last, the final pass comes as quietly as the first. The thread is drawn through one more time, then gently secured. No flourish follows, only the small satisfaction of completion, modest and calm. You rest the needle on the cloth, and it makes the lightest tick as it touches down. The sewn sections now sit together with a new steadiness. When your fingers cradle them, they hold. Not rigidly, not tightly, but with the kind of support that lets a book open and close without strain. You smooth the fold with your thumb, and the paper answers with a soft, contented hush. For a moment, you do nothing more. You simply keep the book in your hands beneath the brass lamp, while rain continues at the window, and the workshop breathes in its old wooden way, and the fresh line of thread lies quiet within the pages, almost hidden, almost secret, doing its gentle work already. Chapter 5. Paste, cloth, and gentle pressure. You simply keep the book in your hands beneath the brass lamp, while the new thread rests hidden in the folds. And for a few quiet breaths, there is nothing more to do than feel how the sections sit together now. The rain goes on at the window in its even, patient way. Somewhere along the wall, a shelf gives a small, familiar creak, then settles again. The room seems pleased by stillness. Then your attention shifts, softly, to what will hold and strengthen what has been drawn back into place. The dish of paste waits near the edge of the cloth-covered table, pale and smooth in its shallow bowl. When you draw it nearer, it gives off that faint, clean scent you already know from this room. Something between paper and water and wheat. Simple and reassuring. Beside it lies a strip of linen, light in color, with a weave so fine it seems almost to drink the lamplight. Folded nearby is the cloth that will cover and protect, its nap worn gentle by handling, its color somewhere between faded moss and weathered blue. You set the book down carefully and let your palm rest for a moment on the cover, as if to tell it there is no hurry. The brush is lifted next. Its bristles, pale and soft from long use, spread slightly when dipped into the paste. Not too much, just enough to gather a thin sheen. The first stroke along the waiting linen is quiet as breath. A smooth drag, a soft whisper. Paste darkens the fibers for a moment, making the weave more visible beneath the lamp. Each tiny crossing thread revealed, and then softened again beneath the wet gloss. You brush from one end to the other with an even hand, then back again, thinning the layer until it is scarcely more than a shine. The motion is so gentle, it seems less like coating than like smoothing water over stone. The linen lies still beneath your fingers, accepting what it needs and no more. Outside, rain taps lightly at the pane, then slides downward in longer lines. The brass lamp keeps its small amber circles steady on the table. Beyond it, the workshop remains in tender shadow. Shelves of waiting books, folded cloths, jars with dim shoulders of glass, the old wooden drawers that hold their contents so quietly. Everything stays near. Everything stays small. You lift the prepared linen and bring the book a little closer. The spine, newly gathered by thread, waits open to receive this next kindness. With careful fingers, you lay the strip down along its length. There is a pause here, one of those calm and necessary pauses, while you look without strain and let your hands understand the edges before they move. Then you adjust by the smallest measure, a little to the left, a fraction lower, now straight. The linen settles where it belongs. Your fingertips smooth it from the center outward, pressing out nothing more dramatic than air and uncertainty. The paste beneath gives just enough slip to allow the cloth to find its truest line. You follow the shape of the spine with light pressure, not forcing, only guiding, and the material begins to cling there, as though it had always meant to. The brush returns for another quiet task. A little more paste, spread thinly again. this time where the covering cloth will lie. The sound is one of the softest in the room, bristles moving over board and spine, a feathery hush, a delicate brushing that seems to calm the air itself. The adhesive leaves a cool sheen that catches the lamplight and then dulls as it settles. You lift the cloth with both hands. It has a pleasant weight to it, not heavy, only dependable. Its surface is faintly textured, a little softened at the edges from age and use. And when you lower it over the prepared spine, it falls with a quiet grace, like a curtain eased into place. You do not rush the contact. First, the middle touches, then one side, then the other. The cloth meets the book in stages, each one gentle, each one certain. Again, your hands smooth from the center outward, across the spine, over the hinge, along the board. The movement repeats, slow and unbroken. Your palms know how much pressure is enough. Not a pressing down so much as a steady invitation to hold. The cloth answers at once, conforming to the rounded shape beneath, drawing close to the linen, the paper, the thread hidden inside. Layers that had loosened from one another now begin, quietly, to agree. The bone folder waits nearby, old cream in the lamplight. And when you take it up, its satin-worn surface fits into your hand as though it has been waiting there all evening. You use it lightly, not with any hard edge, only with its smooth curve, coaxing the cloth into the shallow channels beside the spine, tracing the line where board meets hinge. The sound is almost nothing. A muted glide, a silken hush against fabric. Under that measured touch, the form of the book grows clearer, neater, more settled in itself. Then your hand returns. Because skin is softer than any tool, you smooth once more with your palm. Then, once again, the workshop listens around you. Rain at the glass, a board underfoot giving the faintest murmur, the small porcelain tick as the brush is set back into its dish. These sounds do not interrupt the work. They belong to it. They make a kind of quiet frame around the table, around the lamp, around this one book being asked, with great gentleness, to hold together. At last, a clean cloth is laid over the fresh covering. Your hand passes over it in one last, even stroke, pressing through fabric to fabric beneath. The pressure is broad and calm, spread through the whole palm, and then released slowly, without lifting the peace of the moment. When the cloth is drawn back, the book seems changed, not by anything sudden, but by a deepened composure. The spine sits more securely. The covering lies close and true. The edges are aligned. Nothing calls attention to itself. The repair is modest, almost shy, content to be felt more than seen. You leave the book resting there beneath the warm brass light, while the paste begins its quiet drying, and the rain continues its soft work beyond the window. In the hush of the workshop, with paper scent and linen scent mingling in the air, It is enough to notice how easily one thing can be laid against another, smoothed, aligned, and gently asked to stay. Chapter 6. Pages eased flat. For a little while, nothing more is asked of that first volume. It rests in its place on the table, linen settled, paste thinning quietly into the spine beneath the lamp's amber glow. You let your hands move away from it without hurry, as though the room itself understands the value of leaving certain things undisturbed. The rain goes on at the window in its even, patient way. Somewhere in the shelves behind you, wood gives a small, familiar sigh. Then your attention turns to another book waiting nearby. It is not a large one. When you lift it from the modest stack, it comes up lightly, with a softened weight that feels almost companionable in your hands. Its cover is faded blue-gray cloth, worn paler along the edges where fingers have found it over the years. The corners are rounded, not from damage exactly, but from use so steady and ordinary that the shape has simply gentled. When you open it, the pages do not lie in crisp order. They rise and dip in a tender unevenness, as though they have remembered damp weather, warm rooms, many readings, and long rests on bedside tables. The leaves are feathered at their edges, each one carrying the fine softness that paper takes on with time. Some are slightly wrinkled, some bowed just a little away from flatness, and some hold the faintest wavering, like water long since gone, but not entirely forgotten. Under the brass lamp, these small undulations catch a low gold light. Nothing about them feels urgent. Nothing asks to be forced back into strictness. They only ask, perhaps, for a quieter place to settle. You lay the book on the folded cloth and open it no farther than it wishes to go. The table receives it with its old, dependable steadiness. Close by, the bone folder remains where it was set earlier, cream-colored and still. The brushes are clean and resting. A pair of blotters waits on the side of the table, pale and thick, with that soft, dry look that promises absorption without insistence. You draw them nearer with a faint whisper of paper against wood. For a moment, you simply look. The workshop is very calm now. The active motions of stitching and pasting have given way to something gentler, something that asks less of the fingers and more of the breath. Rain hushes the world beyond the glass. The lamp keeps its small weather of warmth over the table. In the air, there lingers the mingled scent of paper, paste, cloth, and old boards, all of it softened by evening. You begin with the first uneven page. Your fingertips slip beneath it carefully, lifting only enough to feel where the paper wants to move. It is thin, but not fragile in a fearful way. It has a quiet resilience, the sort that old paper often keeps. Belief rises with a faint, dry murmur. You guide it back down, not pressing yet, only helping its edge meet the others more evenly. Then your palm follows, warm and light, smoothing from the inner margin outward in one unbroken pass. The page answers with a small, yielding, "That is enough." Another page, then another. Some need almost nothing beyond a touch and a pause. Some ask for a little more time beneath your hand. You do not correct them so much as accompany them, easing each one toward rest. The wrinkled places are not erased. They soften. The bowed edges are not scolded into obedience. They are invited nearer to stillness. Each movement is simple. Lift, align, smooth, wait. The rhythm is slower even than sewing, slower than brushing paste along linen. It leaves more room for the room itself to be heard. The rain ticking lightly against the pane, the faint settling sound of the shop beyond the workshop door, the almost silent shift of your sleeve over the table's edge, a distant runnel in the gutter outside, carrying water along in a thin, steady thread. When several leaves have been gently coaxed into better order, you lay a blotter between them, its surface cool and dry against the paper. Another rests above. The book seems to accept this layering without complaint, as though it has been waiting for such a quiet arrangement. You smooth the top blotter once with your palm, feeling the slight cushion beneath, the hidden irregularities now held in a kinder balance. From the tools set aside earlier, you choose one of the lighter weights, not the wrapped stone this time, but a flat metal piece with softened edges and a modest heaviness. You place it over the blotter with care. The contact makes only the faintest sound, a small, settled note on the table. Not too much, only enough to keep company with the page while it remembers how to rest. You move deeper into the book this way, section by section. Some leaves carry a little more wavering than others. One page near the middle has a crease that catches the light like a tiny stream. You trace beside it with one finger, then smooth across it with the gentlest breadth of your hand. The crease remains, but less sharply. It no longer stands apart. It belongs more quietly to the whole leaf, as a fold in linen belongs to cloth that has been carefully laid away. Now and then you pause, with both hands resting lightly on either side of the open book. In those pauses, the workshop feels smaller and more sheltered than ever. The shelves stand in their dim rows. The jars on the back ledge hold their little glints of amber light. The floorboards keep their old silence. Outside, the rain has not changed its mind. There is comfort in tending something that does not need to become new, only easier, only calmer in its own shape. At last, the pages you have handled lie in a softer order, their wavering gentled beneath blotters and light weight. The book itself seems quieter on the table, as though some small strain has left it. You leave your hand there for a moment, on the upper blotter, feeling the faint coolness of paper beneath paper, the steadiness of pressure, the stillness that follows careful touch. Then even that motion grows smaller. The lamp glows on the blue-gray cover, on the pale blotter, on the smooth edge of the waiting wait. Rain brushes the window. Somewhere in the shop, a shelf gives one low, contented creak and is still again. Chapter 7. The Press and the Waiting. The lamp glows on the blue-gray cover, on the pale blotter, on the smooth edge of the waiting wait. Rain brushes the window. Somewhere in the shop, a shelf gives one low, contented creak and is still again. You leave that small sound where it belongs, folded into the room like another layer of cloth. Here at the table, the work has grown quieter. The blue-gray book rests beneath its blotter and weight, no longer asking for your hands just now. The first volume, with its mended spine and linen laid smooth beneath the covering cloth, waits nearby in its own patient stillness. There is less to do at once, and so the evening widens in a softer way. You draw the first repaired book closer. The boards are supported carefully, the cloth cover held with the same easy respect as before. Nothing is hurried. The motions now are smaller, slower, as if the room itself has lowered its voice. A pair of pressing boards waits at the end of the table, plain and well used, their surfaces rubbed satin smooth by many evenings like this one. You lift one, and it gives a quiet wooden note against the table. Then the book is settled between clean layers, cloth and board, each surface meeting the next in gentle order. The weight of the boards is reassuring, not heavy in any harsh way, only steady. The mended spine lies between them as though entering a sheltered place, somewhere flat and calm, where paste can set and cloth can remember its new position. You smooth the top board once with your palm, feeling the faint grain beneath the skin, the mild coolness of wood that has weighted away from the lamp's center. Then, your hand rests there for a moment longer than it needs to. Beside it, the blue-gray volume is ready for its own quieter kind of pressing. The blotters have already taken in some of the wavering dampness from the pages. When you lift the weight away, it leaves only a soft release, a little easing of pressure. The top blotter comes free with a whisper. The page beneath is not perfect, and does not need to be. It lies easier than before. The feathered edge no longer lifts so sharply. You place fresh blotter above and below, aligning the corners gently, and guide the book between another pair of boards. Now there are two books waiting under stillness. The press stands a little beyond the lamp's brightest circle, near the side of the table, where shadows deepen into amber brown. It is not imposing, only familiar. Its wood is darkened by touch and years, its metal turned dull and kind by use. You bring the boarded books to it one at a time, carrying them close so nothing shifts. The first is laid in place. The second follows. The screw turns with a low, patient sound, wood and metal meeting in measured agreement. A little pressure, then a little more. Just enough. never more than needed. The handle comes to rest. The books are held. The work, for now, is simply to let them be. And because there is waiting, the room offers itself more fully. Rain touches the panes in a fine, even pattern, so soft it seems almost woven into the silence rather than falling through it. Now and then a fuller thread of water gathers and slips down the glass, tracing a cooler path through the dim reflection of the lamp. From somewhere above or beyond the back wall comes the faint runnel of a gutter carrying the evening onward. It is a distant sound, rounded by brick and weather, and it asks nothing of you. The shelves make their old, occasional adjustments. A board settles. A row of books shifts by some immeasurably small degree, enough only for a tiny wooden answer to pass through the shop. The floor beneath your feet keeps its own counsel, but even it gives one muted reply when you change your stance. All of it belongs. All of it has happened before, on evenings of rain and lamplight and careful hands. At the table, the tools wait in the order you gave them. Needle in its shallow tray, bone folder pale as old cream, brush resting clean enough for now, its bristles faintly darkened near the ferrule, the little wrapped stone, the folded cloth, flat weights catching a dim stripe of brass light along their edges. Once the active work pauses, these things seem less like instruments and more like companions at rest. You take up the brush and rinse it in a small jar of water, gone clouded with the thinnest memory of paste. The motion is slight, circular, almost soundless. When the brush taps the rim, it makes a delicate porcelain note. You dry the bristles in the much-washed cloth, drawing them gently into shape. A second brush follows. Then the small dish is wiped clean. Paste leaves behind its clean, plain scent of wheat and paper. And beneath it, the older smell of bindings, boards, cloth, and dust warmed by the lamp. One by one, each object returns to its place. The needle is laid down with a faint tick. The thread is wound and set aside, pale and orderly. The bone folder slides back to its corner of the table. The cloth is folded along its softened lines. None of these motions is final. They are only part of the room's slow breathing in and out, its way of loosening after concentration. Now, there is almost nothing that needs doing. You remain near the press a while, not to check, not to hurry, only to share the waiting. The books are hidden now between boards and wood, but you can feel their presence there, quietly becoming more settled than they were an hour ago. The lamp holds its amber circle. Beyond it, the workshop fades into tender shadow. Shelves, drawers, the edge of a jar, the suggestion of folded linen. Rain continues at the window, steady as thread drawn through paper, steady as breath. And in that held, unbusy time, the whole shop seems to rest more deeply around you, as if every board and hinge and page has agreed. For this one rain-softened hour, to be still. Chapter 8. Returning them to the shelves. After a while, when the waiting has become part of the room's breathing, you turn back toward the press. The handle is cool beneath your fingers. Metal gives a faint, familiar note as the pressure is eased away. Not all at once, but slowly, with the same measured care that has guided the evening from its beginning. The wooden frame relaxes with a soft, settling sound. Beneath the boards, cloth and blotter and paper have been lying in quiet company. And now they are uncovered, one layer at a time. Each lifted gently, each set aside without hurry. The first volume comes up in both hands. Its cover, once loosened and weary at the spine, now feels steadier, gathered back into itself. The cloth is still rubbed smooth in the places where many hands have held it over the years. The faded gold on the spine remains faint, and the corners are still rounded with age. Nothing about it has been made new. It has only been helped into rest. Your thumb passes lightly along the spine, feeling the calm firmness beneath the covering cloth. The hidden linen, the patient thread where the sections were drawn together again. The book closes with a quiet completeness, as though it remembers its own shape. Beside it, the blue-gray volume is lifted from between its pale blotters. Its pages, feathered at the edges, and once gently undulant, now lie easier. Not perfectly flat, not pressed into strictness, but softened into a more comfortable stillness. The cover has kept its faded rain cloud color. The leaves open and close with less resistance, their wavering eased. You smooth one palm over the front board, then lay the book down for a moment in the lamp's warm circle, where the cloth catches a dim, silvery sheen. Around you, the workshop remains hushed and close. The brass lamp glows steadily over the broad table. The scent of paper and paste lingers in the wood grain and folded cloths. Rain continues at the window, a fine and even sound, as if the dark outside has no edges at all. Somewhere beyond the narrow door, a shelf gives one soft creak and is still again. There is one last small ritual before the books leave the work table. A clean cloth is drawn lightly over each cover, not to polish, only to remove the faintest trace of paper dust, to smooth away the evening's handling. The motion is slow and almost weightless. Cloth whispers over cloth. Your fingers pause at a corner, at a head cap, at the edge of a board, noticing the familiar shapes now settled into order. Then the books are gathered, one in each arm, held close enough to feel their modest weight. The workshop door opens with its old, softened sound. Beyond it, the shop is dimmer than before, though not dark. Lamps left low among the shelves keep small pools of amber along the aisles, and between them, the shadows are deep but gentle. The public room, emptied hours ago, has become quieter in a different way than the workshop. There, The hush gathers around tools and table, and the intimacy of handwork. Here, it stretches a little farther, moving among rows of waiting spines, along cases and corners, over the worn runner on the floorboards. The whole shop seems to be listening to the rain. You step out slowly, and the floor answers with muted, familiar murmurs. On either side, books stand in long, patient lines. Their cloth backs show softened greens, faded reds, weathered browns, deep blue gone nearly to dusk. Some titles still catch the low light in worn gilt. Others have faded into plainness. Dust has long since been kept from gathering thickly here. Everything feels tended, though not arranged too tightly. There is room for age, room for use, room for the slight lean of a favorite volume against its neighbor. The first book is returned to a middle shelf in the history alcove, where the wood is dark and smooth from many years of careful reshelving. You pause before placing it there, letting your hand find the space it has left among the others. The neighboring volumes make way by the smallest degree, cloth touching cloth. Then the mended spine slips back into line. It stands easily between two companions of similar height, not conspicuous, not set apart, only home again. Your fingers rest for a breath along the row. The shelf itself feels steady beneath your hand, its edge rounded by time. The books beside the restored one seem to settle around it, not moving, only completing the pattern. A little order returns so quietly that it is almost impossible to hear. And yet the room knows it. In the same way a straightened picture or folded blanket changes a whole corner without asking to be noticed. The shelf feels calmer for the book's return. You carry the blue-gray volume farther on, through a narrower aisle where the lamp glow thins and the rain at the windows becomes a little clearer. Here, the shelves hold smaller books, modest bindings, poetry, letters, old travel accounts, slim companions meant for private reading. The air is faintly cooler away from the workshop, touched by the nearby glass and the evening beyond it. Rain threads down the pane in silvered lines, and the sound of it seems wrapped in the old curtains and wood. The blue-gray book belongs low on the left, in a place where several cloth-bound volumes of similar size rest shoulder to shoulder. You bend and slide it carefully into the waiting space. Its softened cover meets the others with a quiet, papery hush. For a moment, your hand remains at its spine, ensuring nothing catches, nothing strains. Then, even that small contact eases away. Now, both books are back among their own kind. You do not leave at once. Instead, you drift a little farther down the aisle, moving slowly enough that each shelf can be noticed without effort. Here is a row of atlases with broad backs and dulled lettering. Here a case of small marbled volumes, their patterns like faded streams. Here, a high shelf of encyclopedias standing in patient authority. And below them, a cluster of novels whose covers have been softened by many evenings, much like this one. The shop has its own order, not severe, not exacting, but deeply familiar. A place for each book, and around each place, a little margin of quiet. The lamps hold their amber circles. The rain goes on at the glass. Wood settles once in the wall, then is still. And as you stand among the sleeping rows, with repaired volumes returned to their shelves, and the aisles gently restored to wholeness, the whole bookshop seems to gather itself more comfortably around the night. Chapter 9. Lamp glow and rain on glass. And as you stand among the sleeping rows, with repaired volumes returned to their shelves, and the aisles gently restored to wholeness, the whole bookshop seems to gather itself more comfortably around the night. For a little while, you remain there, not needing to move at once. The shelves rise on either side in their quiet colors: moss, brown, faded red, softened blue, and the low lamps leave warm pools along the aisle, while the upper boards rest in shadow. Rain goes on at the front windows, a fine, steady brushing sound. So even now that it seems less like weather than part of the building's own breathing. Somewhere behind you, from the hidden workshop, the brass lamp still glows through the narrow doorway, a patient amber waiting. When you turn back toward it, the floorboards answer underfoot with the small, familiar creaks of old wood easing to your weight. The workshop receives you again at once. The broad table, the folded cloths, the dim glass jars, the press now standing open and empty in the corner beyond the brightest circle of light. The room feels smaller than the shop and warmer, as though all its quiet has been gathered close and kept here. The evening's work is done. What remains is only the gentle putting right that follows care. On the table, a few tools still rest where they were last set down. The bone folder lies pale against the wood, smooth as old cream in the lamp glow. A brush with light, worn bristles waits near the shallow paste dish, where only a thin crescent remains, already dulling as it dries. A needle glints once, and then settles back into stillness. There is no urgency in any of it. You simply draw the folded cloth nearer and begin. First, the brush. Its handle is warm from the room, faintly tacky where a trace of paste has dried near the ferrule. With the dampened cloth, you wipe it slowly from wood to bristle, turning it gently between your fingers. The last scent of paste rises clean and mild. Wheat, paper, water, and then softens into the larger fragrance of the workshop. Old boards, linen, dust kept kindly in corners, rain-cooled glass. When the brush is clean, you smooth the bristles back into their narrow shape and lay it in its place among the others, where it seems at once more restful. Then the paste dish. Porcelain gives a tiny, delicate tick as you lift it. The remaining paste is gathered away with quiet circles of cloth, leaving the inside pale and clean again. Even this small motion has its own calm rhythm. Turn, wipe, fold the cloth, turn again. Outside, rain threads softly down the panes. Inside, the lamp holds steady, touching the rim of the dish, the edge of the table, the satin-worn curve of the bone folder. One by one, the small things return to order. The needle is set back in its tray. The pale, flax-colored thread is wound neatly, so no loose end strays across the wood. Flat weights are stacked with a muted, careful sound. And the smooth stone, wrapped in faded linen, is lifted, felt for a brief moment in the palm, then placed beside them. The blotters used for the blue-gray volume are gathered into an even pile. A few tiny paper fibers, the day's soft leavings, are brushed together and taken away. The table clears slowly, not all at once, but in little widenings of open wood. As each object is put by, more of the grain appears beneath the lamp. Old scratches, softened marks, the polished places where many hands have worked over many evenings like this one. You pass the cloth over the surface in long, unhurried strokes. It whispers as it goes. Dust lifts. A faint tackiness left by paste disappears. The table becomes plain again, ready for another day, though no more will be asked of it tonight. Around you, the room's smaller sounds come forward. A shelf settles with a low, companionable note. Rain taps once more firmly at the window, then resumes its hush. Somewhere outside, water slips through a gutter in a thin silver run. The press gives a tiny answering creak as the air cools. None of these sounds asks for attention. They simply arrive and pass. Folded into the room's stillness, you hang the dampened cloth over the back of a chair for a moment, then fold the dry ones, one over another, edges aligned by touch rather than sight. Linen against linen makes a soft, almost papery sound. The folded stack goes back to its shelf, where the cloths wait in pale layers beside jars and brushes and narrow rolls of tape. The order there is modest, familiar, sufficient. Nothing shines. Nothing is new. Everything is ready. At the window, the glass has darkened further. The world beyond it has thinned to rain and reflection. The brass lamp doubled in the pane, the suggestion of shelves behind you, the amber edge of the table floating in the black-blue evening. You pause there only a moment. The coolness near the glass meets the workshop's retained warmth, and between them, the air feels especially still. When you turn back, the room seems already quieter for having been put in order. The empty spaces matter now as much as the objects. The cleared table, the closed drawer, the tray with its needle, the brush laid to rest, the press standing by. The work has left no sharp trace of effort, only this settled arrangement, the sense that each thing has been returned to itself. You lower the lamp wick just slightly. The change is small, but it softens every edge. shadows gather more tenderly in the corners. The brass stem glows dully, warmly. The table remains lit, though now as if through a veil. Beyond that circle, the workshop recedes into a deeper hush, and the rain at the window seems nearer, finer, almost like fingertips moving over paper. There is nothing more to mend tonight. Only this room, neat and warm, holding the last of the light. Only the scent of paper and cloth. Only wood at rest. Glass cooled by rain. Tools quiet in their places. And in that gentle order, with the lamp burning low and the windows murmuring softly to the dark, the workshop seems ready to keep watch on its own. Chapter 10. The room settles around you, and in that gentle order, with the lamp burning low and the windows murmuring softly to the dark, the workshop seems ready to keep watch on its own. You remain there a little longer, not because anything more is needed, but because the room has entered that tender hour when even the smallest movement feels softened. The brass lamp holds its round pool of amber over the work table. Beyond it, the corners of the workshop rest in a deeper brown quiet. Shelves and drawers and folded cloths becoming simpler as the night gathers around them. Rain continues at the window, fine and steady, as if the whole street outside has been wrapped in the same hush. There is one cloth left on the table, much washed and pale from long use. You lift it lightly from the wood. It carries the faint scent of paste, clean paper, and warm dust. The familiar scent the room has worn all evening. The fabric folds without resistance, once and then again, edges unlined by touch more than sight. Its softness gives beneath your fingers, and the small square it becomes is set in its place near the brushes, where it seems at once to belong and to disappear into the order already made. A chair stands just slightly away from the table, as though it has not yet remembered the shape of stillness. You rest your hand upon its curved back and ease it inward over the floorboards. The wood gives a low, brief murmur. Then it is quiet again. The chair settles under the table's edge, tucked into shadow, and the little space between table and wall becomes calm and complete. Nothing asks to be done. Even so, your hand lingers for a moment on the table's worn surface, feeling the grain polished by years of work. Here and there are the shallow traces of old use, a softened nick, a faint line where a blade once passed carefully, a smoothness where countless palms have pressed paper flat. The wood is warm beneath the lamp and cooler at the edges, as though it holds both the memory of hands and the nearness of night. You let your palm rest there, steady and unhurried, until the stillness seems to rise gently through it. On the shelves, the tools are already at rest. The bone folder lies pale as old cream. Needles sleep in their tray. The flax-colored thread, wound neat again, keeps its quiet coil. The wrapped stone, the flat weights, the little wooden block. Each has returned to its accustomed place. And because they are there, the room feels all the more settled, as if every small object has drawn one line of calm around itself. The press stands in the dimmer part of the workshop, dark wood and dull metal barely catching the lamp. It is empty now, boards clean, screw loosened, waiting without impatience for some future evening. Nearby, the shallow paste dish has been washed and dried. The brushes stand bristles upward. The blotters are stacked in pale layers. Nothing gleams sharply. Nothing calls attention to itself. The room has become a composition of softened surfaces. Cloth, paper, wood, thread, lamplight, rain. From beyond the narrow door, the shop gives a quiet answer of its own. A shelf settles with a faint creak. Somewhere farther off, perhaps near the front window, rain gathers and slips through a gutter in a thin runnel, then is gone again into the larger hush. The books out there, returned to their places, stand in long, patient rows under low lamps and shadowed upper shelves. Their covers, faded green, tea brown, blue-gray, muted red, have gone dim and velvety in the evening light. The mended volumes rest among them now without announcement, held again in the order of the room. The air has changed almost imperceptibly as the hours have passed. The sharper note of damp wool and street rain that came in at the beginning of evening has long since faded. What remains is gentler. Paper, cloth, paste, old boards, brass warmed by the lamp. It is the scent of things dried, tended, and left in peace. Breathing it in, you feel how small the world has become here, enclosed by shelves and wood and rain-softened glass, protected from anything hurried. At the window, the pane is dark except for a blurred reflection of lamp glow and the faintest suggestion of moving water. Rain touches the glass in fine, even strokes, not loud enough to interrupt, not so faint as to vanish, just there, continuing. If you listen closely, you can hear how it changes from pane to sill, from sill to stone outside, from stone to the street beyond. Each surface receives it in its own quiet way. The lamp burns lower, though not yet low enough to leave the room. Its brass stem glows warmly. Light gathers on the table's edge, on the lip of a porcelain dish, on the corner of a folded cloth, and then thins into shadow. The shadows themselves are not empty. They are full of familiar shapes, known well enough that they need no looking after. So you remain with them for another moment, and then another, while the workshop settles more deeply around you. The shelves hold. The floorboards rest. The repaired books sleep in their places beyond the door. The tools wait without waiting. Rain goes on tracing the dark glass. The lamp keeps its small amber circle, and the room, put right for the night, breathes softly on. as though it has all the time it needs.